And by the time she came out, her son had been stabbed 26 times.
And the family's from Ramallah, right?
No.
From Petunia, from the village of Petunia in the West Bank.
When did they come over to the States?
جيتوا امتى أمريكا؟
أنا جيت من 9 سنوات وهي كانت من حوالي 12.
She came 12 years ago, and the father 9 years ago. The son was born here.
And how long have they lived in that house?
2 years. They've lived in that house for 2 years. So this is a house. It's not an apartment building, and they're renting the ground floor, but they have their own door. So that door had to be knocked on and opened, in case you're wondering by the detail. Yeah.
Can you pronounce the boy's full name?
His full name is Wadia Odai Al-Fayoumi. Wadia Odai Al-Fayoumi. The spelling is in our press release.
I have a perspective. I know that the names are in the press release, but because the mom is still in the hospital, is it okay for us to say her name as well as the boy's name when we share our reports?
Yes, we've talked about that. Well, we decided to release the photo of the boy in order to put a face on his life. I know that we're talking here about a victim of a hate crime in light of a larger conversation, but ultimately he is a human being with a story and a life, and his face matters, his smile matters, that little hat saying happy birthday matters. That's how we want to remember him. There's no shame for us. There's shame for the perpetrator of this act, and there's shame for those who create these atmospheres. But for this family, there's nothing but pride in their son, pride in their identity, pride in their religion, pride in how they've lived their lives.
A question on the mother's condition. Do you have any details on that? On if she's expected to recover?
What I can say is that she's in serious condition. Yes, sir.
You talked before about how there's an environment of racism that's perpetrated by the political leaders in this country. We saw that in 9/11. You know, there was lots of hate crimes against Arabs. We saw that under Trump, talking about Chinese-created virus. And now again, we see Biden saying things I think are perpetrating an environment. Can you talk more about how that's created a circumstance in our country, which is very dangerous?
It does go all the way to the President of the United States. You know, this whole frenzy of rushing to dehumanize Palestinians either by expression or by omission. And that's what I mean when I say these one-sided type of communiques. And the fact that there's a one side to it is fine in the sense that that side needs to be talked about. Like I said, I don't stand for the targeting of Israeli civilians. But the fact that it's not two-sided, meaning that this sentiment, which I believe is the civilized sentiment we should all share, isn't extended to the other side. As a matter of fact, there is an accessory that the United States provides to assist and help in committing the same crimes that we supposedly condemn when it happens to one side. And that's a far cry from just doing nothing or staying silent. There is an active participation through language, through decrees, through financial support, material support, as we would say, to these crimes, in addition to giving the actual weapons and assisting with the actual weapons. There is no effort to stave off the violence that is causing death and destruction to civilians that we know is happening. We demand a call for a ceasefire. We demand a call from our leaders to come back to a level of reason in discussing the origins of the conflict as well as the current events of the conflict, and not to ignore or to pretend to ignore that there is a context. Look, we teach history in every university, in every high school. And if you ask, I ask you, who's responsible for the reign of terror in France in the 1800s, early 1800s? Well, the answer is Robespierre. But can anybody teach the Age of Terror? Can anybody teach the guillotines? Can anybody teach the French Revolution and not be able to mention King Louis and the entire lifestyle and the period and the context in which these things occurred? To erase that history, to cut it off, and to start from that point? That is precisely what we are seeing here. 75 years of oppression and occupation, displacement and dispossession, and not a word on that, not allowed to have a word on that. We've seen anchors sidelined for speaking about this. We've seen Facebook accounts closed, shut down, censored for speaking about this. This is an Orwellian atmosphere in which we are in. It's censorship. You know, those who don't care about this issue, right, they're far from it, that's fine, but you should care about freedom of speech. You should care about human rights. This affects everybody. Yes? Do you have a question? Oh.
You said the boy turned 6 just a couple weeks ago. What day?
عيد ميلاده امتى؟ أكتوبر 6؟
October 6th.
October 6th. Yeah.
And I know he's interrupting right now, but if you'd like to say anything about his son or a
في حاجة
prayer,
عاوز تقولها؟
even if it's just in Arabic.
حتى لو عاوز تدعي له ولا؟ He said, Alhamdulillah, which means, you know, gratitude to God in any situation.
Can you ask him how he would like the community to remember his son?
كيف بدك الكوميونتي انت تعرف انك او تفتكره؟ بماذا؟
حاسب المجرم على جريمته.
To bring accountability for his life taken too soon. He's saying basically that the memory of his son will live with them, but for them to feel that this life was meaningful to the community, to society, to this country, accountability, justice has to be achieved.
Ahmed, can you speak specifically to the Palestinian community right now? Specifically about faith, specifically to Muslims that are scared right now, whether they are in Chicago or in the suburbs where this happened. How are you encouraging your followers during this time right now?
So, would you like to say something? Okay. I was just speaking to the uncle, and he was making that same point. He was telling me very clearly in a private meeting just before, he said, we're not only completely heartbroken and devastated by what happened, but we are afraid of what may happen more in the future, to how many more people. We are afraid in this atmosphere that is being fanned, you know, the flames of hatred and otherization, dehumanization. The Palestinian community feels it more than any. They're at the brunt of it. Muslims in general feel, you know, the periphery of it, but definitely feel it as well. Per the own statements of this individual, Muslims must die. You know, that extension, that connection is always there. But Palestinians basically, again, with their hearts broken over what's happening to their people, over what's happened in their history, over where they are today vis-a-vis a bleak future, have to also worry about their immediate safety of life and limb living here in this most free of democracies in the world. And this is why an incident like this hurts all of us. It hurts all of us because it wasn't a random or arbitrary attack. It was an intended attack per a certain context. And I think our leaders have to rise up to the occasion and show moral authority, moral leadership, and not be cowards. That's what we've seen is cowardly leadership, to be able to address the vastness of the issue and to stop erasing those who are politically weaker. I will submit, my community is politically weaker than others. But that should not be a reason to erase humanity, the humanity of a community, of a people. Because the facts are clear, the conditions are clear, the contexts are clear. We can speak about them. And when we speak about them as adults in a responsible fashion, we're not taking away anything from anybody. There's plenty of empathy, there's plenty of love, there's plenty of reason to be able to have an adult conversation. What we're seeing, though, are individuals and groups and institutions that are attempting to clamp down on anybody who dares to have such an open conversation, to talk about the humanity of Palestinians. We have seen one-sided statements from universities, hospitals, law firms, private, you know, financial banks, in which Muslims work, in which Palestinians work, not a word to their suffering, not a word to the context that they are in. Full erasure. And that needs to change. We're asking for fairness, for balance, not for anything more than that.
And finally, sir, in terms of safety, I know the City Council last week passed a resolution in support of Israel. Are you calling on, what demands do you have on, specifically even Mayor Johnson right now in the City of Chicago, or even Will County, as this war continues? Are you asking for increased police patrols, especially in the communities that are predominantly Muslim communities or those from Palestine? What do you want in terms of, you know, a heightened awareness to make sure that this group is saying?
I call on the mayor to be a mayor of all people. I call on the governor, who has also been extremely one-sided and has not had anything to say about the suffering of Palestinians, the war crimes happening in Gaza, to be a governor of all people. I ask the president, who's in that same vein, to be a president of all people. And more importantly, for all free men and others, to be men of reason, to be men of logic, to be men of knowing history and knowing what's happening in the world today. It's stunning to me to read the text of this resolution that was passed by City Council. It was a stupid resolution. I mean, in the second paragraph, they talk about this is a repeat of the atrocious attack on Israel 50 years ago. Now, what they're referencing is the 1973 war. Okay, I know this because I'm Egyptian-American. And that war, in which the Egyptian forces attacked the Israeli forces, it was military on military, it wasn't an attack on civilians, occurred on Egyptian soil that was at the time occupied by Israeli forces. So there's so many things wrong in that statement. To call it an atrocious attack when it's military on military in the context of war, and to equate it to an attack on civilians is clueless. And then to call it, on top of that, an attack on Israel when it was an attack, inside Egypt by Egyptians to reclaim Egypt from Israel is, again, to completely ignore history and geography. I would submit that probably only a percentage of those who signed that resolution know where Israel is on the map. It's not about what they know or don't know. It's about what they think is politically more beneficial. These are political decisions. These are not moral decisions. These are not informed decisions.
Do you have any message for Muslims who are rightfully devastated by this murder, that they maybe aren't thinking straight and maybe take things into their own hands?
My message to Muslims who are devastated by this is what the Quran teaches us. Do not let the injustice of an individual or a people cause you to engage in an injustice. Do not let the evil of someone cause you to follow or reciprocate in kind. Stick to our standards. Stick to our values. We have been plagued. And again, I'm not here to sugarcoat stuff, right? We know that we've had bad actors in the larger Muslim community. We know we've had acts of terror committed by those who claim to be Muslim in the United States, in our history, and around the world. And back then, when these occur, and should they occur again, God forbid, we've always been super ultra clear about our position as mainstream Muslims, that these acts are not, they do not bear out the values of our religion. They actually are in the complete opposite direction. They're an offense to the very values of our religion. So I tell our community, remember our values, remember our principles, stick to them. Don't let any difficult conditions cause you to renege on the contract that we have with God Almighty to be a just and upright people, to stand with human life, regardless of nationality, regardless of religion, and to stand with prosperity for all human beings, but to stand against injustice, fearlessly, proudly, strongly, even when it's unpopular. I understand that standing with Palestinians, with Palestine, is probably the most unpopular thing one can do in the West, in the United States. But I'll do it every day, without hesitation, because it's the right thing to do. And I'll stand with the innocent lives taken in Israel or anywhere in the world. And that's not a PR move, that's not to placate anybody, but that is an implementation of my deeply held religious beliefs that all life is valuable, all life matters. Civilian lives matter, right? It doesn't matter where you're from. That's not a hard call for us to make. Do you have any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the family have any family members still in Palestine? Is everyone safe?